Welcome to Atomic Cricket Podcast. I am Chirudandan Srinath, your host. I'm joined with my two co-hosts, Vijay Lokapalli sir, one of the most respected sports journalists in India, and my friend Maitreya. Today we have a very special guest with us, Gautam Bhimani sir. It's pleasure to have you. Happy Sports Journalist Day, and we're going to talk a lot of things today. To your colorful dresses, to your viral pic with Wasim Akram on Holy Day. We're going to talk about your journey. Thanks for coming and cheers.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here, and it's appropriate that I should be able to join with one of my gurus in Vijay Lokapalli sir on World Sports Journalist Day. It's so good that we are spanning generations and keeping this flag flying, as it were. So that's a good start. Even if this may be heard by people later, it's obviously being recorded on World Sports Journalist Day, so it's good.
Thank you, Gautam. I mean, it's for a very, very kind words, but you know it very well. I learned it from your father, going on tours with him, and then I had the privilege of going on tours with you. So different eras, but the passion and love for cricket, I think. Your father Kishore sir had far more than you. he was an amazing student of the game. His reading was absolutely spot on, and we learnt a lot. Gautam, I was very privileged, and you were far more because you got to spend so much time with him. So maybe we should begin this with memories of Mr. Kishore Bhimani, because he was an icon. He did radio commentary, he wrote, and then he guided us. So your memories of your father.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate that one should remember him, because a lot of people ask me, and whenever you go into any profession, it could be an engineer, it could be a doctor, it could be a lawyer, and you're a second generation in the same profession, everybody assumes that is what your father wanted you to do. It's the done thing. Father does it, so son follows in his footsteps. Now, the first thing I will say is, even though I did the same thing as he did, I never actually followed in his footsteps in that sense, because he never told me that I have to do it. The only thing he did was, by making me go with him while he was doing what he was doing, he made me fall in love with the entire profession. That's all he did. Not once did he ever utter a word to me in my life that, I think this is something you should do. I'm going to guide you to get. I want you to know those famous words people often talk about, that when the father gives you his first stethoscope and says, son, you're going to be a doctor. And then that's the day I decided doctoring is for me, if there's such a word like doctoring. But there was nothing that he handed down to me except for just instilling in me the passion for this fabulous profession and being close to sport without actually being a sports person. We are all sports people within ourselves, but not all of us are privileged enough to go and be those select 11 or the select 1 or 2 if it comes to individual sports. But if we love sports enough, that's the next best thing, sometimes as good a thing to be part of sport. He was an average sports person. I was an average sports person. He used to tell me stories of how in school he was the hockey goalkeeper, which incidentally I was also. Hockey, football, goalkeeper, cricket, wicketkeeper at school level. And he said, I was there, but I was not very good at it. So I said, why are you telling me about what you were not good at? He said, because I was not good at it. But if it was a measure of passion, I was the most passionate member of my team. The same thing when I used to play in school. I was the least talented person in the class team, but the most passionate. So I would have the insight into the sport. I would do all the strategizing, and I would go and score a duck. But that didn't matter. Everyone still respected my presence in the team because I brought something else to the team. And I quickly realized one day that thanks to whatever my dad had said and instilled in me, that I'm never going to become a sports person. Be real about that. But I can still be in sport. And it's just something that happened, not because he asked me to make it happen, but that passion is what is important to pass on to every generation.
So yes, sir. So you were in sports from the beginning. So was cricket your first choice? So you were into many sports, as you said. You were a hockey goalkeeper, and then you even played football. So you were into many sports. So was cricket your first choice, or and did you expect to be in the cricket field when you grew up? Only in cricket field, have a spotlight in cricket field and cover cricket matches. So did you expect this when you were small?
No chance. No way that one even thought about it. Dreams, maybe, but dreams were of a different kind. I was an only child. So for me, cricket was about going to the backyard. If friends came over, great. If they didn't, it didn't matter. I would still play a full test match on my own in my backyard, bat in hand, one tennis ball and a bat. I'd throw it against the wall. And depending on how I would do, I would be the Indian team of those days. Gavaskar, Chauhan, Vengsarkar, Vishwanath, Yashpal Sharma, the full batting order. And there would be lunch breaks where I would actually go in and eat lunch, come back. There would be tea breaks, which I've got a cup of tea in hand. I would go and have tea. And then there would be end of the day. So I would go through a full test match day, playing it with a scorebook and everything. So that was how the kind of cricket junkie I had become at that point in time, not thinking that I'll do this when I grow up, just because that was something I enjoyed. At the age of 6, I went to watch a test match for the first time, which if you tell today's generation, you have to go and spend 5 days, they laugh at you. 3 hours itself is a stretch, but 5 days, no chance. But it was a natural thing to do. Obviously, there was no option. There was no ODI cricket also, forget T20 cricket. But it was something that you did because there was an atmosphere around the cricket stadium that you could imbibe. Eden Gardens was the first place I went. 80,000 people over there who would make sure they got there before the toss happened on the first day. That was a passion. And that has to get to you. Imagine 9 o'clock toss. You reach some point in time. How does it matter? No. The stadium would be filled before the toss. And people would see the toss. It was a tradition. And I felt it. And it would mean bunking school if it happened to be on a weekday. That, of course, happened when I was in class 3 for the 78-79 West Indies tour of India, when Malcolm Marshall was an unknown and he came. So watching Test cricket in those days was something I started doing. Walking into the commentary box and the press box and just being this annoying child who would ask 10,000 questions, occasionally being thrown out. But I wasn't too loud, so most journalists didn't really throw me out. So it was okay. I helped out. I was a stats mad person. So statistics wasn't professional in those days. Mohandas Menon and company came a lot later. There were statisticians, but they were, they had these huge books and they were very harried all the time. Somebody would ask for a stat and they'd start looking at books and wisdoms and whatnot and pull out something and give it. Me, I would I think I maybe know that, and I would maybe nudge him, help him out, give them a stat. If there was a score that was wrong on the scoreboard, official score, I had a different score from the scoreboard. I would say 1 run less. I think it was a leg by the previous over. Please check that. And they'd be like, okay, fine. Yeah. He seems to know something. So all these little things didn't ever make me think that one day I will be doing it, but the subconscious was heading in that direction.
It's evident that you were a mathematician. These days we hate maths. Okay, let's get into your clothes, right? There's a highlighted question asked from our friends at Gully Cricket to Bouncer Wicket. They asked us, where do you buy your fancy clothes, your colorful clothes? I wanted to put out a colorful dress and I could only find this one, not better than this one. But where do you find it? Where do you buy your clothes?
Well, I have a few favorite brands. Ironically, there are some pants that I like, which is a brand called Loudmouth, which is a golf brand. Now, golf is a sport I'm quite passionate about, not to the extent that, like with most cricketers these days, I play it. I've gone on the course, I've played it with some of my colleagues on tour just for time pass, but I'm terrible at it. As Harsha Bhogle once said, when we both were teeing off together, make sure no one is looking, because I tee off like a hockey player, because the ball goes along the ground. So both he and I were, happy to be embarrassed about our golf game, but we did it for fun. But I love those golf trousers. I love anything with color. And I used to walk into a store, and if you walk into a store with a friend or a colleague and they say, oh my God, have you seen that? Who would ever possibly wear those shoes or those shirts? I would promptly go and buy that. So yeah, if you see the shirts, the pants, the most ridiculous shoes, mostly made by Asics. If you see the Asics Nusa Gel series, it's just nothing but color. So I just have had this thing for it. There's no reason for it. And I'm lucky to have carried it off even on air.
Yeah, Gautam, this thing about color, colorful shirts, and of course your colorful narratives during a cricket match, where you would come up with very delightful sections. Your time spent with cricketers off the field, going and exploring the city and bringing us so much. So you were combining cricket and you were doing a good, fantastic tourism job for those cities wherever you went. I mean, you have traveled to every corner of the world. So was it? How much of effort did you have to do for that? Because we would come to know a lot of it from your show only, that we missed all this in those particular cities.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't look at the hard work of it. Sometimes in this social media era, you see a person posting a picture of standing on the beach with a very colorful liquid in hand and going, my office for the day. It's all very well as a social media post, but the first reaction of people is, that guy's on holiday, lucky guy, does this for a living. Of course, I will say I'm lucky, extremely fortunate, extremely privileged to be where I am and working on cricket. But it's not without hard work. To get there, to be able to create those stories, the amount of shooting time it takes to come up with a 30-second or a 1 minute or a 1.5 minute story is immense. Planning, thinking, getting people together, cameraman, sound person, it's a full team effort. So yes, it's a lot of effort, and it's something that actually happened by accident in Harare in 2001, because it was not something that we normally saw on Indian TV. You covered cricket means you watched the game, you had an analysis show in the middle, and you wrapped up at the end and bye-bye. But that day in Harare, when I was sitting at the pub, how many cricket grounds can people think of in the world that have a pub on the boundary line? It's just the atmosphere. Never mind the fact that it serves alcohol. I mean, people are a little wary about the fact that why would you promote alcohol? It's not necessarily about promoting that. And I've got people here who shouldn't be even talking about alcohol. But the whole point was it was the culture of being able to sit around a place. They serve fabulous food. Never mind the beer. They serve fabulous food. It's a great place to get around. It was called the Keg and Maiden. Great place to sit around and have what we call adda in our Indian culture. And that's what it is. It was their version of sitting around, and they had the most fabulous cricketing pictures. Vijay, you would have seen the 9 slips, that iconic photograph when Australia were playing Zimbabwe in ODI, and Australia, they put on 9 slips just to show the Zimbabweans that we are the boss. So that giant picture of that 9 slips is up there at the Keg and Maiden, and lots of cricketing culture. So imagine sitting around a place like that on a bar stool on the boundary line, watching Sachin score 100. And I was sitting around and saying that people are not getting to see the inside of it. They're only seeing a pan shot of it in the foreground, but not getting to know that this exists. So I went to my boss and I said, can't we do a story on it? He said, okay, but where will we put the story? I said, I don't know. You've got 40 minutes at lunch. Surely you can spare 1.5 minutes. No. Lunch is only for analysis. I said, how much analysis will you do? I mean, you do it, but people also would like a break from the analysis. They've just watched 2 hours of cricket between start of play and lunch. Then they're going to watch another 2 hours after that. In between, you want them to see even more cricket. So he said, okay, do it, we'll see. I cut him a 2-minute story, and it really became a hit. Firstly, with Navjot Singh Sidhu, who was in the studio. Harsha, Sunny Bhai and Sherry Bhai were in the studio. That was the team. And his first reaction was he actually fell off his stool while the show was on live. And he was like, he couldn't get over the fact that firstly, we were showing something different. And secondly, he was like, Guru, how can somebody who's so small hold a pitcher of beer that is so big, Guru? So he was like, he was in splits. So if Sidhu approved, everyone approved. So that was it. From that, every day I was asked to do a different story about the city, about the ground, about what the players are eating and everything. And it's, for the next 15 years, that's all I was doing. But it just accidentally started at a pub in Harare. But it just showed me that people do want to consume more. They do want more. And everything that I do is about me putting myself in people's place, thinking, if I was sitting at home and watching this, what would I like to see? So now that I'm in the privileged position of being there, can I bring it to people?
So, sir, how did you start your journey? So, have you got into cricket? Have you chose cricket out of all the other sports? And then, have you got into commentary or TV shows? So, have you got the first chance? Who gave the first chance? So, talk about that.
Well, how I got into cricket was, I mean, it was sort of almost injected into my veins like a COVID vaccination almost many, many years ago, because I grew up with that. As Vijay said, uh, he would tour with my dad, but I would get to see him at home. So I'd wake up in the morning with the whole culture of cricket. And of course, we all followed many sports. If a Wimbledon final was on in the 1970s, we'd all sit around a radio those days. No, it wasn't live on TV, and listen to it. There was a romance to listening to it on radio. And there's still a romance to, if you follow cricket or any sport on radio, which is unmatched on television. Possibly like the kind of podcast we are doing, where you have to follow what everyone is saying. You don't necessarily know what they're wearing, what they're doing with their hands. So every word that you say is so important. So it started with the romance of radio and listening to cricket on radio as well. So for the first time for me, 1976, when my dad was in the Caribbean, we used to wait for every moment at unearthly hours. 7:30 in the evening is when it would start, but the match would go on till 2 in the morning. And as an 8-year-old, 2 in the morning was ridiculous. Now for me, it's like afternoon. But those days, it was like a big thing to stay up that late. Shortwave radio, you'd somehow tune in there. Tony Cozier was on commentary. My dad did commentary for them as well. And just listening to the romance of that. And Cozier meant the West Indies. It was a voice. I mean, when I met Tony years later, it was like not the same. I mean, I now work with his son. And just that voice was an association with listening to cricket then. And that growing up, you're thinking, wow, this is a sport that I love to follow, along with tennis, along with, of course, football and other sports. But cricket just had its edge because of the culture that I grew up in. And your second part of the question was getting an opportunity to do commentary. I mean, about 2 years later, 2 years after I did that piece from Harare, one fine day, my boss, Ray Hume, who was an Australian gentleman who never knew my background, he never met my dad until he hired me. So I knew that I had got hired for the right reasons, just for me being me, not because he thought, okay, this is the son of a guy who knows cricket, let me give him a chance. No, he didn't know my dad from Adam, and which is why I felt good about the day I was hired for the first time. And 2 years later, again, without any previous background or knowledge, he believed something that even till today, people are not necessarily absorbing. And to be a commentator, you don't have to be an ex-player. Which is no disrespect to people who are ex-players and commentators. Not everybody can be. People these days imagine that I've played 2 first-class games. I was born to be a commentator. Which is not true. Commentary, broadcasting, talking about it, writing is a different profession altogether. Playing the game is something we can't do. We all played in our own limited way. They have got to that level and they've played at that level. No matter how, whether you played 2 first-class games or 100 test matches, getting into commentary, you still need to teach yourself the art of it, the discipline of it. And Ray Hume understood that. He understood that he had, and what a team he had in Australia in 2003. He had Jeffrey Boycott, Ravi Shastri, Alan Wilkins, Greg Chappell, Sunil Gavaskar, and Harsha Bhogle. This was his commentary team over there. And in that team, he pushed me in and said, I want you to be one of the callers, meaning the non-cricket playing commentator. So the combination of a caller and an expert in any sport is what makes commentary. We are watching Euro nowadays, or some of us are, and you can see the best commentators in the world are doing commentary on Euro. They're not ex-players. The guy sitting with them, he's an ex-player. But the main guy is a professional broadcaster. And Ray understood this, gave me the opportunity, and I was able to sit alongside all these greats who knew I'd never played the game before, but they didn't question it. It is just some people who are a little narrow-minded about this entire aspect who question it, saying, how many test matches have you played? None. Doesn't matter. As long as I understand the game, I'm a student of the game, and I respect the person who's alongside me and know that they've played the game, and it's my job to bring out the best in them. That's all it is. That's the reason why we are able to do what nobody will ask Vijay Bhai when he writes any fit. They will look at his writing. They will look at his love for the game. They will look at what a keen student he is of the game. We often mistake the word student for being someone who's 8 years old. No. Vijay Bhai will be the first to admit that even all of us today are continuing to learn every day about different games. So nobody will question him and say, what games did you play when you were a child? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It didn't matter. You read his word and you hang by his every word and know that this is why you respect him and this is why you go along with reading him and listening to him.
Yes, sir. You brought in the topic that you don't need to be an ex-cricketer to be a commentator or a broadcaster or a presenter, whatever the fields in cricket are. We were interviewing some months ago an England cricket analyst, and we asked him whether he had any idea of becoming a commentator, and he said he can't become because he needed to play at least 50 first-class games for England, and then he would be approved and he could do it. Your thoughts on that? Do you think all countries allow this voices of cricket? Like from India, we have Arsha Bogle, we have you, and there are many that we don't know. But which all countries do actually do this? Encourage people who are differently not playing cricket, but who are students of cricket, as you said. Could you explain on that?
My first reaction to what he was told, utter rubbish. Absolutely, as I said earlier, it absolutely does not make sense. The merit of a person who's a broadcaster has to do with, firstly, the knowledge of the sport, how they speak, the disciplines they have, because what that person brings to the table is completely different from what an expert brings to the table. Even if in a discussion where we are sitting over a cup of coffee, maybe you'll ask me that, what do you think of Virat Kohli's technique? Why did he get out caught in the slips the other day? I might give you my opinion casually, but when I'm on a professional platform on the commentary box, I will not open my mouth about that. I will try and look at footage, try and analyze it, and ask the question to the guy sitting next to me. That, listen, you explain to us what is going wrong. Why was it about the bat hanging out too long? Was it about his foot, as Kohli himself said, pointing towards point and not pointing towards covers? He made that adjustment himself before a certain series. My job is to have looked at that footage, to have read about it, and then asked him to give his opinion. Not to say, that's Kohli caught in the slips and there it is again, just not moving his feet the right way. No chance. It's not my job to be saying that. It is his job to be saying that. So if we know our roles, then we will be allowed to do what we do. Now, yes, in England, possible reason why it may happen is because a lot of their cricketers, ex-cricketers, are natural speakers of the game and natural thinkers of the game. So they go into commentary fairly naturally, and they don't notice that someone who's not a cricketer can also become a commentator. There are many who are doing that. Many journalists who are slowly getting into it. But you're right. The mindset can be, so if we have a David Gower and we have a Nasser Hussain and we have a Bumble, as in David Lloyd, who are kind of naturals into the game, why do we need to look for someone beyond that? Well, maybe in England, they may have a glut of that. Not always the case in every part of the world. Look at West Indies, great example. To me, and there can be more opinions of it, there are really only two voices from West Indian cricket after Tony Kozia, who is not an ex-player, and that's Michael Holding and Ian Bishop. Are they the only two great West Indian cricketers in the last 20 years? Of course not. In fact, you will mention many other names before you'll mention them. Yes, Holding was part of the great pace quartet, but Ian Bishop was mediocre, and he knows that. He was not at that same level. He had injury problems, he had fairly few other things, but the likes of Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd, so many other greats, Gordon Greenidge, Desmond Haynes, put them in a commentary box? No way. So Viv has tried his hand at it. Of course, because he's Viv, you listen to him, but he's not good. Clive Lloyd isn't. Greenidge and Haynes aren't. Does that make them less of a player? No, they were all legends of the game. Not everybody becomes a commentator. So yeah, I think each country needs to look at it and do it purely on merit. If you're an ex-player, fine. We need to train you and get you into commentary. Quick example, Dinesh Karthik, India's latest ex-cricketer. Not ex, he's still a current cricketer. India's latest cricketer commentator. it's not an accident that he was as good as he was in the last series. He went through a commentary training course. He did that. He was conscious of it. He wanted a few tips. He wanted to know the disciplines of the box. He didn't just get in there and say, dude, I'm DK. I've done this. Give me the mic. No, he did all that. He worked on his own grooming. He worked on everything. And then he got himself, his personality came out, and it shows.
The next question comes from Sagar Wag from Twitter. He has asked, how was the transition for you from radio to television? So we have heard your podcast episode that you did on 22 yarns, but listeners keep asking us this. How did you happen to transition from radio to television? How was, because the whole technology was changing, and like, how did you get yourself in?
Well, actually, the truth of it is, when it comes to cricket, I started with TV. I never really did radio for cricket, although I'd love to. I've done it once. I did one series, the World T20 in 2016 in India. I did radio commentary for that series for an ICC radio channel. But other than that, it's all my entire career has been on cricket, has been television. And I'd love to, given an opportunity, I'd love to go in reverse. Someone says, listen, there's a series coming up. Would you like to do radio commentary for it? I'd grab it with both hands, because that will never die out. My connection with radio going back was non-cricket. I used to be an RJ when I started my first job, which was in advertising. And parallelly, I used to be an RJ every morning on FM radio, purely playing music, no connection with sport. So that way, there's a love that you have for that medium that, I'd love to come back to anytime.
Yeah, Gautam, I always wanted to ask you one thing. How do you feel so comfortable in the company of such great cricketers? I mean, I've seen you interact with them, speak to them on cricket matters. Your own reading of the game is there. But do you get sometimes overawed or by their presence? Because you have a very fantastic rapport with all these great cricketers.
I think if I think about it hard, it probably is because I managed to meet some of these greats of the game when I was a young kid, which was a privilege I had thanks to my dad. And in those days, it was a different era. Nowadays, you can't really imagine too many cricketers going to too many people's houses as such, unless it's, a planned, there's too much of media attention, social media, this, that, and the other, and too many things, too many commercial commitments. But in the 70s, it was very different. You'd have a team coming over, which meant that they'd probably come home and have dinner. And everyone from an Imran Khan and a Zahir Abbas, from people of that stature, just coming and sitting around like friends. It was not like there was a whole frenzy and huge crowds and things like that. They'd just be sitting and chatting and meeting new people and doing their own thing. And they loved the Calcutta biryani. So like it would come in bucketfuls. And I knew that if the Pakistan team were coming over, we'd get biryani from Shiraz, which would be the big treat for me. I would go out there and we would literally take buckets. How else do you get it? These days we have fancy packaging. So biryani buckets would come home. And I think from those days, if I think about it, Vijay bhai, meeting them like that, feeling comfortable with them. The only difference was when I grew up and I became a cricket professional myself, I had a dilemma because I had grown up calling all these people uncle, and they were still very much around because they had themselves become administrators or commentators or whatever. So I didn't even know what to call them. I mean, Imran uncle definitely is not right. Zahir uncle, he would not speak to me only. And Sunny Gavaskar, great example, because I was with him in the comm box. I mean, somehow with Zahir uncle, it evolved. But 5 minutes before my first ever commentary stint, he's sitting next to me, and that's the only time I actually felt overawed, because I felt awkward more than overawed. That I've seen him since I was 5 years old or 6 years old. Now he's my colleague, from being this legend of a batsman and somebody my dad has watched and covered, and friend of my dad's also. What do I call him? So I whispered to him and said, we're on in a couple of minutes, but what do I call you? I can't say Mr. Gavaskar. It just sounds too formal. You don't get, because the chemistry between two commentators is important, right? At any level. If I were to call him Mr. something, or it just wouldn't be right, and definitely not uncle. So finally we agreed in a couple of minutes on Sunny Bhai. which again is very natural when it comes to Indian respect. So Sunny Bhai was ordered, and that's what I called him while we chatted. And in the evening, I get a call from Ray Hume, who I talked about earlier, my Australian boss. Now, he was a stickler for most things. He gave praise where it was due, and obviously the carrot and the stick worked together. So in the evening, I said, Ray, how was it? My first day of commentary, Adelaide Oval in the evening in the broadcast area. He says, mate, very good commentary, mate, really good. But I have a bone to pick with you. I'm like, what have I done wrong? He said, you know, you've got one of the greats of the game, 10,122 runs, mate. And you called him Sunny Boy on air. And I had to go and clarify. We all had a big laugh, and Ray was like, why are you laughing at me? And everyone, of course, calmed him down and said, Ray, what he was saying was Sunny Bhai, not Sunny Boy. And then, of course, he had a big laugh, and it's a story I tell often, but that's how it all started.
Great.
So, sir, 3 people in Twitter have asked the same question. So, what was your most memorable tour and experience while covering cricket? So, talk about the most memorable tour you had in all these years of covering cricket.
Well, it would have to be that same tour I just talked about. In fact, that same very day, because while many parts of the world have been interesting for different reasons, you know, some grounds have just been the prettiest, the most breathtaking. That moment in Harare was iconic because it started off an entire trend of these offbeat stories. But I think that first day of commentary, nothing can match that. To be in a commentary box with such greats, it was an overwhelming moment. But overall, that tour was fantastic because there was so much happening. We were there for almost 3 months in Australia, and everything happened on site, which is what I'm sad about these days. Not enough broadcasters are not wanting to do enough on site. Let's forget the last year and a half. There's a reason why we are doing things remotely. But even before COVID happened, generally for budgetary reasons and for other reasons, people are like, okay, we'll have our studio in Bombay and we'll have the match going on in Melbourne. Doesn't work. I mean, there are enough sponsors, there's enough money in the game. Get on site for everything. Every viewer sitting in India doesn't have the privilege of being there. You do. Get there and bring the country to the people's homes. By sitting in a studio in Bombay, yes, you've got greats of the game talking about it, but analysis is not important. If those greats of the game are sitting in Melbourne, they'll bring you a completely different perspective than sitting in a studio in Bombay. So that was one of the big things. It was the first tour that we went on site for everything. Even in 2001, South Africa, Zimbabwe, we did partly on site, partly from Singapore. But then Ray, he was the guy who said, listen, Singapore is not the place. It's a lovely city. You get the best crab over there, but it's not the headquarters of cricket. Headquarters of cricket is in India, which is why we moved it to Delhi. And the headquarters of cricket, when you're covering it, is on site. So if it's a Melbourne test, your headquarters of cricket is the MCG outside there, inside your broadcast van, which is why it was so important. That tour, we took 72 people with us, our crew, which included everybody, including statisticians, scorers, our own cameraman, including the Channel 9 cameraman. We had our own cameraman bringing our perspective on the coverage. So if we needed to talk about Rahul Dravid while they were covering Steve Waugh and batting, we could do that. Our own cameraman would focus on Rahul Dravid. We'd do a Rahul Dravid package. And that's how the flexibility we had. And it was a coverage tailored for the Indian audience. We had stories for the Indian audience. We had Sunny Gavaskar giving his special presence. We had the color stories showing you the sights and sounds of Australia. And that's why I think that tour is unmatched from anything else.
So, sir, while three of the people on Twitter have asked memorable tour and all those things, one person has asked, what's the most bizarre interview that you have faced or maybe you have asked? And he told me to depict a story from that.
Well, it's a tough one to find that. I always find it tough to answer, but more than bizarre, I think one revelation that came to me was in terms of how players respond to interviews. So interviewing is an art by itself. the number one thing about doing an interview, especially when it's live and when you're seeing people's faces, a TV interview, is about making them feel comfortable. Because you have to remember that they're not necessarily always comfortable. Some are, some aren't. So as long as you can suss out that, what generally used to happen is most people will give you agreeable answers. It was such a fantastic thing. All yesterday's practice paid off for you that you took 5 wickets today. Yes, it was really good that I practiced hard yesterday. And the fact that they made only 270 means you had a little bit more confidence with yourself. Yes, it was. 90% of the time, 99% of the time, people will agree with you, provided you said something reasonably sensible. One particular interview I remember doing, I think it was either in Southampton or it was at Headingley with Ravichandran Ashwin during a test match. And he's one of the guys who speaks his mind. Another future commentator will soon after DK, as and when he decides he wants to be. But he's the first time I realized, and we have what you call producers in your ear, right? And producers tend to have very strong opinions. So sometimes, even though you're a journalist or you're a presenter and an anchor who's doing the interview, you'll still hear in the ear, okay, now ask him about his 5 for 5 years ago in Brisbane. Okay, so you're kind of reacting and you wait for your next question. It'll be like, okay, tell us about your 5 for 5 years ago in Brisbane, hoping like hell that the guy, producer, has done his research and it's true. So you've got to balance between what your producer asks you to ask and what you as a experienced anchor can ask. On that particular day, they were constantly asking about something controversial about Ashwin's action. I think he had tried his leg break for the first time in the nets, if I remember right. So I asked him, I said, so you picked up those wickets, but tell me, is the leg breaks that you're trying out in the nets, is that making a difference to how you're bowling? Who told you about that? Have you seen it with your own eyes? Did you see that I bowled leg breaks? Were you there? I know you were not there because I know you were out bungee jumping yesterday. So you could not have been there. He gave it back to me straight on air. And I was like, yeah, actually, Ash, I must confess I wasn't, but it's something that we've had a lot of feedback. I tried to defend myself. We've had a lot of people who've written in and asked us, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know people have not written in and asked you. Your producers in your ear is telling you to ask that, no? Yeah, okay. Tell him it's okay, Ash, let him come to the nets and I'll show you a thing or two about leg break and off break. Thank you, Ash. So that was that. He didn't mean to be offensive or anything, but he just said, listen, boss, get your facts straight and then come to me. Don't try and make this a breaking story. So it was good. You appreciated him for that. He didn't say it in a derogatory way. And the viewer got a little bit of a smile out of that.
Gautam, you are best qualified to answer this. See, the game is evolving. We all know how people are, ICC is trying to get back Test cricket, and then there is so much of private leagues which you go and cover. You went all the way at the height of pandemic to West Indies, to do the Caribbean League. That was very, very brave of you. So how do you look at it? I mean, is the game changing? Are we getting, is the passion going out, in the sense there is very little connect between the fan and the player directly through Twitter, social media you may have. But do you believe that that joy of cricket is slowly ebbing away?
Well, I hope not. But I think what we cannot do is take it for granted. I think we are in an era right now, we can't just take it for granted. Maybe 20 years ago, you could. 20, even 30 years ago, you could take it for granted that cricket will keep going and we'll keep going and the lovers of the game will keep going. And if you need to fill a stadium, people will come. Of course, they'll come. You don't need to market it to people, right? In 1978, you didn't need to scream and shout. I mean, there was no social media. How come 90,000 people turned up at the Eden Gardens? They just open the paper and they know which date it is. And they've kept it. Yes, there was a reason for it. There was not so much cricket. It was an annual date with the game. That is, of course, the reason. So now that we live in a reality, in an era where we've got a glut of cricket every day. I mean, right now, as we speak, there's a Hungarian league going on that people who choose to follow are following it. So if you're on certain fantasy sites, you can actually go and make a team for a Hungarian league in cricket. So there's a lot of cricket going on. I think we can't take it for granted. Whatever highest level of cricket is there at the game, it needs to be marketed, positioned correctly. If Test cricket maybe needs more of day-night cricket to allow people to come in the evening and watch, so be it. If it needs to have the World Test Championship properly conducted and therefore every Test match matters, so be it. ODI cricket definitely needs to have something addressed, because while Test cricket is the pinnacle of the game, T20 is the future. ODI kind of is in between, trying to pull at both sides. Well, who are we? What are we? And other than a World Cup that comes once in 4 years, doesn't ODI really matter? A bilateral ODI? I think not. We are going to play Sri Lanka in 3 ODIs. I'm going to be doing it on CricBuzz. We just had a discussion saying, what are we going to talk about before the game? Because it really doesn't matter. Because it's not the World Cup. So you're not getting points for that. You're not getting anything for that. So I think administrators need to get hand in hand with cricketers, ex-cricketers, and look at how we treat each form of the game, how we market it to the next generation, how, to make sure that the likes of Chiru and Krishna, who might be themselves passionate about the game, but how do we get them to maybe sit through 5 days of a test match without just doing it for a podcast, and doing it because they probably are enjoying sitting through those 5 days. So all those things I think need to be addressed, and as long as we don't take it for granted, I don't think there's any cause for worry. It still has a tradition that will always continue, but we need to get more new audiences into it and accept that there's nothing wrong with change. If T20 is to become T10 for, say, the Olympics, let it become that. Don't resist it, because you're still having the same bat, same size ball, and you're playing the same size game. If it needs to be finished in a shorter amount of time, so be it. Don't try to be a purist for the sake of being a purist. If you ask me, best form of the game, Test cricket. If you ask me, any day I'll still say T20. I will go so far as to say that I enjoy it as a spectacle rather than a genuinely competitive game of cricket. But there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not being derogatory. All I'm saying is there's two different kinds of games, and they can all coexist and they all have a future.
Sir, another Twitter user, his name is Rishi. So he asked why Sir doesn't cover international matches these days. So he asked that question.
Well, Rishi, it's all about getting an opportunity. I think times change, broadcasters change, everything happens. I've been working freelance for the last 4 years now, and I think it's a different change that I myself am enjoying. While for 16 years, it was like any time, throughout the year, I had no option. If India were traveling, I was there with them. I loved every minute of it. But the reason I chose the option, I could have continued, moved cities. I live in Delhi. The hub of cricket is really in Bombay. I could have moved to Bombay, continued to join the caravan and be with it, but I chose not to. I chose to be freelance. Gives you the option to work on many other things. As Vijay just mentioned, traveling to the Caribbean, if I had still been there, I wouldn't have been going to cover different leagues, seeing different parts, even more different parts of the world. That's my next assignment coming up now, this year's Caribbean Premier League. With again, travel not being completely opened up is going to be a challenge as to how to get there, but that's part of the fun of it. So to answer Rishi, yeah, maybe not every single test match or ODI on broadcast, but I'm certainly there on and analyzing it from different sides and possibly writing about it. And when it comes to these leagues, I'm very much there.
So, sir, let's talk about your father, right, Kishore Bhimani. And as young teenagers, we definitely don't know who he was, but I've been reading some articles about him, and I've asked Vijay Lokapalli sir about your father. And Rishi has asked one question, that what have you learned from your father? Because you answered it a bit at the start, but like, what are things in general, maybe not like in cricketing terms, maybe in values or something like that would help you in your life?
Yeah, I think, as I said, for me, purely in terms of cricket, it was the passion and the knowledge for it that was just passed down to me that way. And then I had the option whether I wanted to turn it into a profession or continue to be a spectator. But in addition to that, what the biggest thing I think I learned from him was the way he dealt with cricketers, right? I mean, it's a different matter that some of them became friends and they came home. That was a different era. But for everybody else, he would never invade in their space. And that was something I've always learned. Um, it may be a different style of journalism, but for me, following somebody around, hounding them, trying to get to them when they don't want to be gotten to is something I would never do. I maintain my distance. I always have. And I think one example is something that it was a few words that I heard from Sachin Tendulkar that will always remain with me. On the day of his final test match, at his farewell, he took time out to speak individually to different people. Imagine how many people were hounding him at the Wankhede that day. Everybody wanted a piece of him. And Sachin is unique in that his second interview ever, televised interview, was done by my dad. The first one ever was done by Tom Alter, and that was in India, in the place where he grew up. And the second one, which was his first international interview, which was done in England after he'd got his 100. My dad happened to be there, and he got a call from The World This Week, which was a news program then. And he did that interview for him. And Sachin remembers that, of course. And then, of course, during his 200th and final test match, I was interviewing him. So he realizes, and felt old, of course, saying that, yeah, it started with your dad and my career's finished with you. And the one thing he said to me in those 2 minutes that he spent with me, autographing a blank tie, I had worn a blank white tie that day deliberately because I wanted to get that signed by him. And I still have that. It's just a blank white tie. So while he was signing that, he said, the one thing I appreciate about you and dad is that you gave us space when you had to. And we always respected you for that. We never had to worry about the fact that, oh my God, here he's hounding us. And they automatically would come to us if they had to say something. And it was good of him to say that. And I was glad that the fact that I followed in my dad's footsteps in that respect, with that value, I think it was important. Vijay Bhai will know, there's a huge section of the Indian media, particularly now, who thrive only on getting in people's space and getting in their face, and a lot of pure journalism is going out the window, and which is why I think we need to go back to the beauty of reading the words of Vijay Lokpalli, rather than saying that, Vijay Lokpalli told me that actually Virat Kohli is an alien. He's not going to make a revelation like that. If there was something like that and it was genuine, he would write about it in a nice way, and you would get to know, not because it was breaking news.
Yes, Gautam, there are 3 quick questions you'll have to answer for me, because I have always again wanted to ask you. 1, a sequel to Confessions of a Cricket Junkie. Are you planning? Are we going to have some more beautiful, hilarious anecdotes from your cricketing travels? 1. 2, your love for golf with your dear friend Murali Karthik, or Karthik Murali as we call him now. And 2 and 3, in future, do you think there will be some fantastic innovation, a weird one, where some broadcaster will ask Gautam Bhimani to do commentary from the ground when a match is on? You'll be standing at third man and doing commentary. Do you think something like that, some innovation to attract the viewers, can happen?
Well, to answer each question one at a time, first and foremost, a big yes. The sequel is being worked on. Actually, more than a sequel, it would just be an improved version of it, because at the time it came out, maybe I was in a hurry to get it out, knowing that there were so many more incidents to follow. And I think between 2006 when the book came out and now 2021, I've got so many better pictures, anecdotes, incidents, things that I'd like to share with people. So definitely it's on the cards. My laziness is because it's the reason why it's not already come out. One of my regrets during the pandemic is I should have taken advantage of all my time here and written it during that, but never mind, it will still be done. Love for golf. You cannot get a better golf lover than Murali Karthik, who's a friend, a neighbor, and a fellow lover for good dressing. He presented me 5 multicolored belts recently. Not multicolored, each one had a different single color, and they're golfing belts, which I treasure and wear all the time. So thank you for that, Karthik, and thank you for getting me hooked to golf. I think if he keeps at me now, I'll be on the course often enough. And the third question, which I think is very, very true, I think we definitely have room for a lot of innovation, especially in the modern day. T20, T10 definitely calls for getting stuff closer to the action. I'll give two quick examples. One was um, when I did commentary from a helicopter in the West Indies. Antigua test match was kind of boring. First team made 500, second team made 500. It was a world record by India. Every one of the 11 players in the Indian team bowled. VVS Lakshman got wickets, Rahul Dravid got wickets, Ajay Ratra got 100 in that match. And during that match, because it was a lull in proceedings, I got a call from the world feed producer, would you like to go up in a chopper and do some commentary? Just because we want to liven up the coverage. And I did. And it was fabulous fun. Scary at time, my first ever helicopter ride that was. The doors were open. The guy kept banking this way so I could get a better view. I said, no, I can see well. Thank you. But it was one of the innovations that I think things like that can come back. You could have blimps. You could have, obviously you don't have people on top of drones, but a lot of drone coverage coming into being. But yeah, as you said, being on the boundary line, I don't know if you remember, Vijay Bhai, there was I think it was a Lord's bicentenary match a few years ago when Nasser Hussain stood at first slip and did commentary. So I happened to be at Lord's that day watching it, and I was wondering, why is he walking onto the field? The match is about to be on. And he literally stood about 4 steps behind the slip cordon, fully dressed. I mean, we know players get mic'd up. That's a great thing. But he was there as a commentator standing at fly slip and doing commentary. Now, it was not an ODI. It was not an official ODI. It was an exhibition match. But still, I thought it was brilliant. Some people criticized it. But I think there is room for all kinds of interesting things and interesting angles that you can come from. I once did a commentary session that's my last example. KFC were a sponsor in South Africa at Centurion, and they had this fantastic VIP viewing platform that they raised the platform high above the ground. Everyone sat on these chairs with seatbelts on, eating chicken and drinking and watching the game below. So I did a full few minutes of commentary from up there. But sky's the limit when it comes to T20, T10 and interesting things. So I'm waiting for that invitation to do something completely ridiculous.
Before I pass on the next question to Krishna, I want to add here to tell Chiru and Krishna both and Akash that 2002 test match where you did the commentary from helicopter, I was there, and I'm very, very thankful and grateful to you, Gautam. You know for what? You clicked the best picture for me. You made me come, and you said, no, you have to be here. So we went into the dressing room where Viv Richards and Sachin Tendulkar. So and that picture is a treasure for me. I'm standing in the center, Sachin on my right and Viv Richards on my left. And it happened only because you clicked the picture. So thank you very much, Gautam. Yes, Krishna, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So talk to us about the art of commentary. So what makes a person a really good commentator? What are the points we need to get to know so that we can become a really good commentator and entertain people as well as cover the match? So what makes us interesting in that way and likable? So talk us about that.
Wow, that's a question that could probably take a week to answer. But I will try and answer it the best way possible. The number one rider to that question is that there is no right answer. I'm not an authority on that. All I can do is pass on my learnings from what I have done. Point number 2 is that everyone's unique in that way. Everyone has a unique personality that they should allow to bring out, right? Whether you're a caller or an expert, one thing each individual owns is a personality trait. And there's nothing wrong with bringing that out. Commentary is something, cricket commentary, sports commentary allows you to do that. Danny Morrison is funny, he's nutty, he's like that in real life as well. And he brings it out in his commentary. If someone were to tell him, oh, Mr. Morrison, can you please be a little more serious? We don't want you to clown around. He wouldn't know what to do. I mean, it's not that he does it all the time. He brings his seriousness, he brings the right point, he brings his experience, talks about fast bowling, talks about the seriousness of the game, keeps the disciplines of commentary, doesn't talk over the ball. But he brings out his own personality. So, point number 2, be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. Right? I remember a few years ago, we had this hunt for Harsha. It was called Harsha Ki Khoj. It was a talent hunt that we did at ESPN Star many, many years ago. 2 editions of it. And the first thing we found that many people who were young people coming to do it tended to want to imitate others when they were bringing their own commentary to the fore. So they were literally given a clip and they were told 1 minute, go ahead and do commentary. And then you would shortlist and go to the next round and so on. Most people I found, especially in the bigger cities, they would come on, the light comes on, and then they would start speaking in an accent, trying to imitate Tony Gregg and Richie Beno, and yet they speak normally like all of you speak. And I would keep stopping them. I said, hang on, I just spoke to you when you came in. You were like speaking so normally. What happened? No, we've been told that to stand out, we have to do, my coach told me this. I said, with all due respect, please tell your coach that we wanted Rahul. We did not want Tony. I mean, the late, great Tony Gregg is not here. So we are choosing you. We're not choosing him. So be yourself. So that is important, to be yourself, whichever side of the fence you're on, ex-player or not. And of course, the third part of it is, don't ever take for granted that microphone is something that anyone was born into. Nobody was. A professional broadcaster needs to learn it. An ex-player needs to learn it. There are disciplines in the commentary box: when to speak, how to speak, what to say, what all the buttons mean. It's an entire course you need to go through. Radio is different from TV. When do you speak in radio? In radio, you need to paint the picture of everything that's going on. You know, if a fast bowler is coming in, I used to remember listening to Henry Blofeld, very funny, great English commentator. One of the great things that I used to see about him is how he described everything. You close your eyes, you can actually see someone's shirt sleeves flapping in the wind, the long hair, the blonde hair of a Graham Dilley. Even if you've not seen any of these people, when a radio commentator describes it, you've actually seen the whole match. And you've seen those people. You've seen what's happening in the stands. In TV, it's different. If you see a guy with blonde hair and he's got green glasses, you don't have to say, oh, look at those green glasses and the blonde hair. No. You add to the picture. You see that and say, oh, that reminds me of Jim Carrey in The Mask, or something like that, where the person can see what's happening and you're adding to it. So those are just, in a nutshell, different things that you need to remember. But as I said, to truly answer your question, I'd need about a week. But if you remember these few points, then you'll know that for anyone who maybe wants to get into it, who's interested in getting into it, or wants to judge someone who's already in it, keep these things in mind.
Last question before we wrap up this episode, Gautam sir. We need to talk about that viral Holi pic with Wasim Akram. So Pakistan cricket team were celebrating with the Indian cricket team, the Holi, and the viral pic that went on Twitter and Instagram. So talk us, get yourself throw back to that moment, talk about that, and then how it went viral. Obviously, you need to talk about that.
Well, I think most important was the experience, going back to that. It was time when I was in class 10. My reward for finishing my ICSE exams was to go and watch a test match in Bangalore. So we had actually happened to have met Wasim Akram because he had come home for dinner during the Calcutta test match, which happened earlier, which was a bit of a distraction for me because I was 4 days away from my first maths exam in ICSE. But my dad said, it's okay. 2 hours you're allowed. Not that I was studying every minute anyway, but it's okay. And he said, your reward at the end of it, it's coinciding with the final test match of the series. We're going to fly to Bangalore and watch it. I said, great. And we actually flew on the first morning of the match because my exam finished the previous day. And even in those days, the Indian Airlines pilot in the morning flight that we took to Bangalore gave us updates on the score as we landed into Bangalore. Pakistan, I think, had lost some 5-6 wickets in that first session alone, having batted first. And with delight, he said that for any of you going to watch the game, let me update you on the score. And those days, there was no mobile phones that we would get it a quick update. So we had to rely on some things like that. And then we got to the West End Hotel and we checked into the Pakistan wing because the Indian wing was full and the heavy security because it was India-Pakistan. And then came the 4th day of the match, which was a rest day. Something most people don't remember. There's a concept called the rest day. In the middle of a test match, usually 3 days, rest day, then 2 more days. In this case, because it was Holi, it was 4 days, rest day, and then the 5th day. Um, what happened on the rest day was, because it was Holi, Pakistan, we were staying in the Pakistan wing, and 6 o'clock in the morning, first Abdul Qadir, who was staying in the room next to ours, another legend of the game, great leg spinner, he knocks on the door, and one of the Indian players had put gulal on him, and he got very panicky. He said, "I've got red powder on my face, and it's never going to come off in my life." And my dad said, "Bau," that was his nickname then. He said, "Bau, don't worry. It's gulal. It's just a gesture of love. It's part of Holi. Chill. It'll be fine. You just wash it off. It'll go." Okay. He goes back to his room. Half an hour later, another few Indian cricketers had come knocking at these Pakistan cricketers' doors and pulling them out one by one and putting color on them. By 10 o'clock in the morning, we had also got involved, my dad and me, and we decided it was one full-blown Holi party. Everyone was in the West End pool. The Taj people were obviously not happy about it, but it went out of control. Everybody in the pool with proper permanent colors. Imran Khan was the only one who hadn't come out there. They found a way into his cottage. He had a captain's cottage. Climbed through the bathroom, pulled out Imran, brought him there, threw him in the pool. And it was the most riotous experience one could ever imagine. And imagine the camaraderie for people who don't understand the relationship between India and Pakistan. They all imagine it's two nations at war. It's two nations politically at war. The two peoples of Pakistan and India, and this is not just a statement to sound dramatic, have been as much brothers as we continue to be. Of course, we are rivals on the field. Of course, we'll continue to be. When India and Pakistan step over that white line, we will continue to say that it's a fabulous rivalry, and the more bitter the rivalry, it's a sporting rivalry. We're not trying to kill each other ever. And that's why when you step off that white line, there's no better friendship than you can get between two people who are sporting rivals. And that's what that day in the pool showed, how much friendship there was between the two teams. And for anyone who goes back and sees the footage of day 5, when Gavaskar made his greatest ever test innings, in my opinion, when he scored 96, despite having made 34 test hundreds, I think even he'll agree that this is one innings that matches all his test hundreds. But one thing you'll notice, if you can see the footage clearly, Tausif Ahmed and Iqbal Qasim, the two spinners, they were literally caught red-handed. We talk about it as a very different way. You can see that the color had not gone off their hand. And that was all the hangover from the previous day's Holi. Whether or not that helped the ball turn more, I don't know, because the pitch was pretty much the very reddish clay of those days, Chinnaswamy. But yeah, it was an experience to remember for a lifetime.
Well, that's it for this week's episode with Gautam Bhimani, sir. You're a great storyteller, and we loved being told all your stories. Thanks for coming again, and thank you, Vijay sir, thank you, Maitri, and thank you, Akash, all our team that we are doing this. Thank you, sir, once again for coming.
Thank you very much, Krishna, Chiru, Akash, everyone behind the scenes, and of course, it's a pleasure to be on a platform with Vijay Bhai, whether talking about it or generally imbibing more of the game, because he continues to inspire all of us, because evergreen, ever young, and making sure that even though he's spanned, like Sachin said, Sachin has spanned an era from my dad to me. Vijay Lokpally has also spanned an era from my dad to me, and he's still batting, still going strong, still hitting the hundreds.
Thank you, Gautam. And I must tell these young kids that what I admire the most about you is your humility and the respect you have always shown us in the press box wherever we have traveled. So thank you, Gautam, giving us some wonderful cricket stories on and off the field. And it was a pleasure hosting you today.
Thank you.